about how do we maintain seed purity in papaya, not just for genetic contamination, but also on our land we'll grow several different varieties, and we can get cross-pollination, so we want to make sure how do we know when we save seed that we're saving the seed from the plant that we want. Does everybody know the difference in the flower shapes for for hermaphrodite, female?
We want
Okay. Yes, thank you. So you can pass these around, and they're marked, but generally, this is a female. See how bulby and big it is? And these little more skinny, long, these are hermaphrodites. So these are perfect flowers. Ilana talked about it before. They pretty much self-pollinate. So you can get cross-contamination. So if you really want seed purity, you still have to protect them. The female flowers, if you ever opened up a papaya and it's kind of round instead of that nice long shape or the pear shape, that's probably a female, and it might not have any seeds in it. And that's happened. So, I mean, you can pass these around and look at the difference in morphology. The male flower is like so completely different that you can't help but know it. It just sends off a spray of these flowers like everywhere. They don't look anything like papaya flowers. And you want to cut those down because you don't want them. They'll be a strong outcrosser with the female flowers. And so that's where you can really get some.
And they don't produce fruit.
And they don't produce fruit, right?
Don't you need at least one, though?
No.
None.
Yeah, the hermaphrodite.
They're hermaphrodites.
They're weird plant. They actually have all three kinds of flowers on the same. They can have all three kinds of flowers. Yeah, not on the same.
So what we do, we test all of our papaya because when we sell to the market, we sell it as non-GMO papaya. It brings in a better price, and plus that's what we want to promote. So what we do is we bring it over to the Kohala Extension Center. So you want to take the newest leaf, sometimes this is hard if your papaya is really tall, and just take a piece that's the size of a quarter. If you can't get the newest, you don't want to take these leaves. They can't really test for the genetic contamination in those. You could take this leaf. You want to just take this leaf, put it in a plastic bag. You want to mark this bag. You know, if you have 32 papayas, this is number 1 of 32. And you want to say 1 of 32, because now you want to go look, when you get your results back, you want to know you have 32 papayas to look at. And then you mark it with the same, you mark this plant. If we're just testing for contamination, we just put it around the stem, and we put that same number on there. Tie it better than that, and we put 1. It doesn't take long for them to get the results back, and they cost $3 a sample. So then once we get the results back, if we have a genetically contaminated one, we cut it down, get rid of it. If we don't, then we know all the ones we have that we're growing now. And every time we start new plants, we do this again. The onus is on us.
What about if the plant itself is not contaminated, but the flower can get crossed with the GMO, and then that fruit would be a GMO fruit?
So in the first generation, the fruit is not going to be contaminated. The seeds are going to be. So it's what we talked about before. You're going to be getting a non-GMO papaya the first season, but if you plant those seeds, there's about 400 seeds in a papaya approximately, a lot of seeds. And every one of them is an individual pollination event. So you might, it used to be we'd test the seed, but then we realized that really didn't work because there are 400 seeds and you might have 2 that were contaminated. Those happen to be the 2 you planted. So now we just do the leaf test.
So the Mexican papaya, can they be crossed?
All the papayas can cross with each other. Yeah. So if you don't want them to cross, you find a hermaphrodite flower. We don't really do this with the females because we don't, like I said, sometimes they don't have seed or so little seed, so we don't save seed from them. So we get these little glassine bags, and they're nice because they don't get moisture in them. We get them online. I have a bunch of them. I can share some with you today if people really want to do this. And so you would just slip this bag onto this plant and tie it with, I didn't bring the dental floss, we just tie it with a little piece of dental floss. Right. And then you got to mark it. You know, we put the date, and this is the flower, so you could tie it with this. And this is the flower that when this grows, it's going to push this bag off. Once this flower drops off, it can't be contaminated. So this bag is only important while the flower is open and receptive to pollen. So then I keep this tag on because I know when I harvest that papaya, I know it's pure. Whether it's a tartan.
How long is the pollination period on the flower?
I don't know how long the pollen's viable. Yeah, that's a good question. We just leave them on, and you know, eventually it grows enough, it pushes that little bag off.
If you bag it before the flower opens and then wait till the bag falls off, that it'll be.
Right. You notice I didn't bag this one, which is open. I bagged the closed one. I'm sorry I didn't say
And
that.
if the flower is closed and it
Yeah.
doesn't get pollinated, will the fruit have seed in it?
It will, because this is a hermaphrodite.
It's
So it's
self-pollinating.
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 So it's pollinating within this bag. And you can do this with any of the plants that are self-pollinating, cucumber or whatever. I mean, it is another way to maintain seed purity. It doesn't just have to be papaya. Is that clear? Is there any other questions?
Yeah, Lindsay, the flower doesn't need airflow?
No, because it's really not on there that long. So once this flower kind of drops off, this bag and it starts to grow, that bag will just get pushed off. We don't use little like muslin bags or whatever because we've been told, I don't know, that they maybe can pollinate through it. I think it would be hard. Some people use a little envelope, but that'll get wet and kind of mushy if you have wet weather. So, I mean, be creative. And then when, yeah, you could make staple and wax paper. Yeah, that's a good point.
Or freezer paper, like plastic coating.
Right, or parchment paper or something like that. Yeah.
Can I share a little bit about
Sure,
papaya?
go ahead.
So I found a few things. I've been growing papaya several generations. One is that when the tree starts to produce and it's vibrant and it's producing great papaya, that's the time to start your next generation for me, because that way by the time those are starting to produce, this tree is big, it's not producing as much, the fruit's smaller. And I experimented drying the seeds and planting them right out of the fruit, and I get a much better pollination if I just scrape them out of the fruit, put them in a tray, cover them with about 1.5 inches of dirt. You think that they're not viable because they take a long time to sprout, and then all of a sudden I have like 200 starts. Also, I've heard from many people that they don't like to be transplanted. I go bullshit. You know, I transplant them 3 times before I put them in the ground. When they're very small, I put them in like a 4-inch pot, and I let them get to about this tall. When I put them in the ground, I usually dig a hole about this size, no bigger, and I put 5 plants in there. So, because not all of them are going to make it, maybe one of them is going to be a male, 1 or 2 is going to be a female, and then I end up having a vibrant hermaphrodite, 1 out of the 5. And if I plant them when like my fruit's producing, then I have a continuous stream of papaya.
That's great to share, yeah. And when I call that cheap potting, when you throw them all in the same pot, and then they're very easy to transplant them out. And I find too, they are not picky at all about transplanting. And even when they get root bound in our 4-inch pots, and we think, oh geez, you know, we should have planted them a month ago. And we still plant them out, and they just grow up and do fine.
So I remember, or I seem to remember, when I have gone to the GMO conventions in which the universities are talking, they're saying that no, papayas cannot cross-pollinate because the flowers are too big for the bee to want to go in there and get pollen. It doesn't cross-pollinate, and I just wondered about that.
Well, with a female, you know, it's a big flower. This is
Right.
actually a female flower, and the bees do go in there. But the hermaphrodites, it's difficult for them to be cross-pollinated. And they tend not to. But we don't really want to take that chance
Right.
because we
No, I
share
understand.
seed that's non-GMO.
Right.
If you're just going to be selling the fruit, you know, we do say it's non-GMO,
It's
but
for
it's,
me, but I
yeah,
want non-GMO.
right. So then, Lauren talked about planting the seeds fresh, and they do germinate really well fresh. I'm going to show you a little process of fermenting the papaya seed, and this is the same process you would use for tomatoes, cucumbers, in order to speed up that process of, like Lauren said, they sit in there and you think, oh, they're all bad, and what, sometimes 2-3 months later, you know, they come up. So if you want them faster, because this got shaken up, it's sat here about, when did I do these, Monday? About 7 days. So I leave it in about a week. I wait, and with tomato, a real nice white mold. A real nice white mold will form over the top.
Like you do with the whole tomato in the container? Or?
So the tomato, I tend to cut it around the circumference, only because it's easy, and then I just squeeze the seed into a container, and then I just add enough water to cover. And I put that container out. Sometimes I'll put like a paint strainer bag over it. You really don't want to, you want it to ferment aerobically, not anaerobically. So I only put this lid for traveling. I'll put like a cheesecloth or paint strainer, only because those little fungus gnats get in, they lay, then there's larvae all in there, it's
Or
disgusting.
put a coffee filter on top, then poke holes in the lid.
Yeah,
Maybe.
any way to just let air get in, but keep the critters out.
So these are wet seeds that you just put straight out?
I just scooped them out of the papaya into this and added just a little bit of water because it's pretty dry. Tomatoes will have a lot of juice, depending on the tomato. Cherry tomatoes, it's like...
And so then do you dry those afterwards?
So I'll go through what I do now. So next what I do, it's nice when you have a sink, but we don't. So you're going to want to, I'm going to throw these in here so we can all see them. Oops, there's some more.
How long did you let it sit in the water?
This was about 5 days. Okay. Yeah. So now I'm going to add a lot of water. And what you'll see is you have some floaters. See that? Those are not pollinated. They're light. That's why they're floating. There's some white ones. So I'm going to just pour carefully. I'm going to pour all this water off and all those floaters. Okay, stop. Now, if I pass this around, you can kind of see that gel coat is floating. Can you see that? It's kind of milky looking, a little cloudy. See that? So that gel coat is fermented off. The UH Seed Lab, what they do is when they're fermented, they put them in their Cuisinart with this is actually what they do at the Seed Lab. It's a Cuisinart with the bread blade, not the putty blade.
Right.
And they pulse it. You know, and all the seed they sell all around the country and to other countries is done in their loops. That's how underfunded they are. It's really sad.
What does that do?
It takes that seed coat off, but you don't want to like be, you know, because then you're gonna bust up the seed. You're just trying to. I'll show you what I do. Is that so? What I do. And I sometimes even do this before. Sometimes I'm like, I don't have time to ferment. So it's harder. Or Jeff my husband will like say, here's seed to save, and it's already out. So, you know, you'll notice in fresh seed you got that coat. So I'll just do this. You know, I'll just abrade them around and get that seed coat off. It's harder if you don't ferment them. I'll just kind of rub them around. And you'll know because it kind of goes poof, poof under your finger that, that seed coat's a little, kind of pops off. And so let's see, how am I going to do this?
Use the elixir.
So put these back in here. So I'll wash them like I showed you about, 5 times, but I just look at how clean the water is when I'm pouring it off. So now you can see it's floating and there's a lot of cloudiness, right? So I'm going to just pour that off. That's probably a lot of the seed coat. You can kind of see that seed coat coming off. You want to go slow. And then I add more water. I do it, just swish it around. Let it settle. I don't wait too long because I don't want all that other stuff to settle. And I keep doing this until I really think that it's clean. Okay, I'm not going to keep doing it because I want you guys to learn to do dry seed cleaning. But so then I'll pour it in here. And usually what I'll do is take a paper towel or a towel and I'll just hold it and try to absorb as much moisture as I can. And then I just throw it on a plate and let them start drying. And the next day I go and especially with tomatoes, I stir them up so they're not sticky.
So you can plant them like that.
You could plant them like that. This is a lot like if you wanted to store them,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to store them with the gel coat on because that's extra organic material that can rot and cause your seed to go bad. Or you can just go and plant these. So that's really, are there any questions?
How
That's
would you
it.
save them? Store them?
So then
At
it's,
this rate?
yeah,
Put them on the
saving,
ground.
so saving seed, what I do, and if you go online onto our website, and if you really want to know all the ins and outs of making your own mini home seed bank, this is a great article written by the man who ran the seed arboretum in Oahu. He's retired now, but he's written all this up. It's very comprehensive, and you can just download this. It's called Guidelines for Successful Seed Storage and How to Make a Miniature Home Seed Bank. So that's there. What I do is, okay, my seed is dry. You can get these in a really small size at Papaya for like 100 for less than $2. So what I'm trying to do is to store them in a way that I'm excluding moisture and keeping them cool. So I'm going to put my seed in one of these. It's dry now. I've let it dry. So this is dry seed. My seed goes in here. Sometimes I'll put a little slip in there, what it is. I tend to, with my seed, because I have a chest refrigerator, we're off grid, and the temperature varies a whole lot. So I don't want that seed to be changing temperature too quickly and condensing. So I put it in a little paper. It can be a regular envelope, a used envelope. You can make one out of used paper. I seal that up. I definitely label it. When did I collect the seed? I even put with my papaya, where was that plant? So, record keeping again is really important. And the paper helps absorb any moisture that might come in because these Ziploc bags are not 100% moisture proof. And I put all my seeds in another bag. And I might put all my papaya seeds in one, all my greens in one. And then I put them in a Tupperware thing like this that has a good sealing top and won't get moisture. And I'll just drop in a slip of paper on the side and it'll say beets, carrots. And so, because I have Hillary can tell you half the refrigerator, her core refrigerator is full of our seed. And I can just pull these out and say, oh, this is my carrots, beets, whatever, and pull one of them out. So you'll figure out your own
A
story.
couple ideas for you. My understanding is Ziploc freezer bags are almost airtight, whereas storage bags are not.
Yes.
So going with the freezer instead of the storage bags, but what about putting silica gel in with
You
it?
can, and that's on the guidelines. Some people use a product called Damp Aid that you can get at the hardware store. I never do that. There's also a process, if you have a self-defrosting refrigerator, you can put the seeds in a Tupperware container with a top open, and that in the back of the refrigerator, and then I forget for how long. Well, it depends on the seed, but because it's self-defrosting, it's drying those seeds out. So some people actually say, dry their seed that way. And then there is silica gel you can get through Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and it changes color when the seed is dry, when it's pulled all the moisture out, and you can recharge that in the oven or if you have a microwave. I don't do that. If you are going to save your seed for, okay, so to back up, not all seed stores for the same amount of time. Some seed will store for 10 years, some for 2. So again, that seed to seed is good to know. I always say the best place to store your seed is in your garden. I don't necessarily always do that, do I, Hillary? Because of my storage, I don't necessarily know how good my germination is after 3 years. So what I do is a germination test. So if you have these little Petri dishes, that's great. And I'm going to pass these around. They're self-explanatory when I started them. So I basically took a little paper towel, wetted it, not so that it's floating in water, and I counted my seeds and I sprinkled my seeds on top. And I put the date I started, and on your little package you have these germination sheets that you can use. You can use a CD cassette. You can use a plate with a paper towel over it. Small seeds I tend to do like that. These are tomato. They're just starting to poke out. I started these on the 15th. So what you would do is every day look at how many are germinating and count off, day 1, 2, whatever. And by the end, you can see what % germination you have. I don't necessarily go, okay, I have 63% germination. I just go, wow, that's good. These seeds are still good. It's a lot faster to do it this way than to put them all in a cheap pot, pot of soil, and plant a bunch of them and then see who comes up, because you waste a lot of time that way.
What about the freezer?
You can store in the freezer. Yeah, getting them in and out. So when you take your seeds out of the freezer, you have to let them come up to room temperature without opening them because they'll condense.
Right.
And then they just don't recommend for the home gardener to store in the freezer. They really recommend the refrigerator.
Yeah, the freezer's more like if you're going to store something for a long period of time. It'll store longer, but you don't want to be dipping into that supply because you're changing temperature.
Yeah, because we're using our seeds all the time. So, and I'm going through and I'm like, oh God, where's that seed? Or, oh, we got to plant that. This is called the ragdoll test. And it's generally used for bigger seeds. So I started these on the 13th. Sorry. Let's see the beginning of the right. There it goes. So it's just a paper towel. You could use a handkerchief. Anything that will stay moist, and you just this one I do count my seeds just because there's so few. And these were a Christmas lima bean. Oh no, these might have been seeds. So I folded it over and then these are bending their way too long. Because you can see they're already sprouted. There we go. And you want to carefully because they're kind of in a line. So, oh no, this was Joey's bean. I got this bean from an old Italian guy from the Kohala lavender farm. He manages it, and his grandparents carried this bean from Italy. So I love this bean. And it's been in there since the 13th, and I only have 1, 2, this one's starting to pop. I always say that this bean, I need to plant it out, and I need to start saving seed, or I'm going to lose this seed. Yeah. Now, hopefully I gave this seed at a seed exchange to one of you, and I can call you up and say, hey, I lost Joy's bean, you still have it. So that's the great thing about sharing seed. We do, there's 3 of us, actually 4 now, 2 people in Molokai, 1 person in Kona, myself. And we send seeds back and forth. How's it grow here? This is doing well for me, whatever. I lost this seed, you still have it. And I cannot tell you the number of times we've been able to recapture that seed, because one of those, only 4 people had it. So this is corn. This is
So you use this for larger seeds?
I use this for a larger seed, because if you had tiny seeds in here and you're opening them up like this, and I just keep them in the Ziploc bag because they stay moist.
Lynn, would you plant those ones that I
You
sprouted?
could, yeah. I could even plant those lettuce and throw them, just take the whole pad and throw them in there. Once they really come up, I can separate them, pick them out and separate them out. So if you're really feeling attached to them, definitely.
So actually they don't need oxygen to in order to sprout?
Not really, they just need to stay moist. So there's corn. That corn, I'd say is 100% germination. This was an old variety of corn I grew that again, somebody's father has grown it for years. It's a den corn, flower corn. So those are the germination tests, and it's really great to be able to do this, because if you go to a seed share station or a seed exchange, you get these seeds, and then you plant them and you say, well, they didn't come up, or they're bad. Well, do a little germination test and find out if it was your planting technique, or you didn't keep them watered, they dried out, or in our case, the cardinals now know where we start our seeds, and they go in and they dig through the pots and they go through seeds. So germination test will say, hey, yeah, this is great seed, I know I can plant this out. It's easy, it's fast, and it's fun. And get your kids to do
Maybe
it.
at this stage they're already good to put in the...
You could plant these, yeah. You'd have to be very careful, because you've got that first little embryo, that first little seed sprout is so delicate, and if you break that, that's it. So, and it's...
When you're going to plant it, you don't do this in the process. You just put it already in the dirt. Right?
If I was going to plant these.
No, if you're going to plant the seeds.
So if I'm going to plant the
Straight
seeds,
away.
right, and I think Wade asked me to share how do we plant our seeds, what do we use for a potting mix. So if they're really, sometimes we grow small seeds, or say the brassicas, cabbage, whatever, that's a tiny seed in these little cells. And I'll just use a straight potting mix that I get a commercial on. The reason I do that is I don't want any weed seeds in there, because these are tiny seeds, and if I'm picking weeds out, I'm probably going to be picking that seed before it germinated out. So I know I have good sterile soil. Once, they're about that deep. They kind of come to a, not quite a point, but close. And then once they're up about 4 leaves, at least 2 true leaves. So the first leaves that come out are not true leaves. And you don't want to transplant at that point, because if you disturb the root, it's too delicate. You're probably going to kill it. So you want to wait until it gets the next set of leaves. And then I just use a little, it's kind of like a scoopy knife. You can buy them, they're called picks or picks or seed companies sell, but a knife works, and you just pop those out, make sure it's nice and moist so it comes out easily. And then I transplant it into a bigger pot. In that pot, I'll use a soil mix we make from the mixture of the Hamakua soil, our compost, some IMOs, because we do a bit of natural farming. I think sometimes Jeff will add some spirulina, and, a little bit of nutrition. But we don't add like fertilizer. We just let them grow up, and when they are about 4-inch pot size, okay, so corn, I generally plant right in the ground, but then I have to cover it with a net or something, because the birds will be right in there digging it out. The bigger seed, beans, I don't plant right in the ground because the slugs will just mow them down. So I plant those in pots, and when they're about this big, I transplant them. So that's kind of how I do it. So what I'm going to suggest to all of you is in your little packet, there was a thing. Do you want to become a Puna? And you don't have to be from Puna. Do you want to become a seed ambassador? And what that is somebody who's maintaining seed diversity, helping maintain what already exists, and maybe as we come up the curve of our knowledge, we can start doing some crossing, some plant trials, but that we get together every other month and we continue this education, because you know, this is totally, you can tell, it's not enough time, there's so much to know. And we can have outside people come in and teach us. So if you do want to become a seed ambassador, fill that thing out before you leave. And then I have seeds for all of you, and I'll ask you where your location is and make a recommendation. And so these are seeds you can take, and I really am asking for you to plant them out right away, because it isn't like I'm giving you seed to store. There's like 8 or 9 seeds. And plant them all out, you know, start them in pots, and if you have questions, email me. And then we'll just stay in contact. Oh, mine got this disease. Oh, mine are doing great. Oh, mine didn't do so great. So now we're doing a little mini variety trial with each other, and we can have a tasting. So we have 4 varieties, and I know other people have other varieties. So when we get together, it's like, oh, does anybody have rice? Do you have that rice seed? Oh, okay, here. So suddenly it's like the pyramid scheme. We started out with 1 seed. We get together and people are growing. There's 4 varieties. So now we each have 4 varieties, and it just keeps growing. So we're our own little seed buddy group, and maybe eventually, if we know we're growing quality seed and we've grown them over several generations and we know what quality is and we define that in the group, maybe we create a little seed packet and we have our seed rack here at Kalani. So that's what I'm proposing. Anybody who wants to be part of that group, if you fill it out and put your information, I am going to contact you and I am going to bug you. So if you don't want to do it, don't fill that out. So I wanted everybody to take part in cleaning a dry seed, and even though it might sound simple, there are some little techniques. So what we have are a couple bags of amaranth seed I grew, and I have some seed packets. After we clean this, you're welcome to take it. There's an information sheet on the nutritional value of amaranth. It's very nutritional.
I love it.
Yeah, you want to. This was a beautiful. There's a picture of it. A beautiful red seed variety. There we go. The birds do like it. I don't protect it. I just get what I get. It will mature as it goes up the stalk. And one thing we wanted to talk about basil. When you're collecting seed from basil, okay, see these are the seed pods, and each pod will have at least about 4 seeds in them. Each of these tiny little bell things happening. Basil is unique in that as it starts to dry, and these aren't ready yet, so it'll start turning brown as it goes up the stalk because it grew. You can see that it's still growing flower spikes. So these are the oldest bracts. These are the newest. So when it gets about a third, like if say it was brown to here, I would pick this whole stalk and put it in a bag because basil will continue to ripen and open in the bag. It won't get pollinated, so all this stuff is not going to happen. But anything that was open and pollinated will. So what happens with basil seed is it shatters really fast. So by the time this whole thing is brown, half of these, there's no seed in them. A lot of people clean basil and they're like, and they'll plant the chaff because they don't, it's hard to, they're tiny little black seeds. And they'll say, something was wrong. It's like, yes, there was no seed in there. It all shattered. So
if it shatters and if it's in a pot, what about putting a big sheet underneath the pot?
You
so
could
they
do that.
might
Yeah.
catch them.
Definitely, you could do that. Any way you can capture them, but because they are one that will continue to ripen, you can do it this other way.
And
too.
it'll just make more flowers after you cut?
No, this,
Oh, once
once
it's
you
seeded.
do,
Well, no,
seed
but
gets
it'll, the
pollinated,
plant will
right?
grow
Before it
new.
gets pollinated.
yes, you can, I usually try to cut it at a
Yeah.
leaf intersection. I won't cut it here just because then you have this big, it
Yeah.
heals better down here.
When you say in a bag.
So that I would cut this stalk and then, so I have, if you have a lot of basil, you just gather it and you upside down in a, yeah, brown paper. You don't want plastic because it can hold moisture and it can rot your seed or cause it to germinate.
And you can just plant those little black seeds in the ground?
It's quite easy to do
Very
basil
easy.
from cutting. It's easier.
It is, but you're not getting that great genetic diversity. And that's really the thing about seed, is you are really getting some genetics. So just as an example, cacao. If you plant cacao as a little baby, a lot of people tell me, oh my God, the Japanese beetles, the leaves are just lace, what do I do? I say, leave it alone. They're like, well, it's going to kill my plant. If your plant dies, you don't want it anyway. So your garden is your first level of selection. What will happen after a while with certain plants, not so much the vegetable crops because they're not in the ground long enough, they have all these genetics that aren't expressed. And so they get stressed and they get stressed and they get stressed and they start turning genes on to, to address that stress. And eventually, the Japanese beetles don't bother. And now I don't have to go out at night with a flashlight and try to, there people are like, well, that's what I do, and I'm like, don't do that. Just, So when you grow to seed, you're starting to select for all this diversity, for disease resistance, insect resistance. So growing from cuttings, you're just getting the same plant over and over and over again. You're not getting all this nice genetic diversity. And that's why, a plant like tomato or pepper that's a selfer, if you just select from one plant, it has a lot of genes in there, but it's just from that one plant. Another plant might have had insects doing something to it, or you put it in some soil that it didn't like as much, even though it's the same here and here, or it didn't get the water. It had to respond to that. It had to change. And you're getting those genetics, and you're selecting for those. So that's the beauty of growing to seed. Plants are intelligent, and they do what they need to do to survive. And it's up to us to select the best and not worry if some die. It's like, good, I didn't have to deal with that.
And everything else in the environment does the same thing. So when I grew my basil just from cutting, eventually the environment caught up with it and got the best of it because it didn't have that genetic seed diversity. It was just the same thing. So the environment surpassed it, and the evolution of survival of the fittest.
Yeah, and you'll get what's kind of called a lack of vigor. And so eventually, if you do cutting of crops that are used to seeding, I'm not talking the canoe crops from keiki, but ones that have evolved with and still do seed readily, eventually you'll just get a real weak plant. Because it's like being, it's being so inbred. So in doing this seed, so I just work in groups in these buckets. So everybody, so what we're going to do first is try to get the seed out of the plant. So it's always fun to learn. Every plant is different, the dry seeded. Lettuce seed you can bang against the side. This seed you don't get as many.
What is that?
This is amaranth. This is the red amaranth. And so what I do is this, and I don't care if I get all that chaff in there because we're going to deal with that. You can do both. You can eat it as a young green, or even as it's seeding, you can use the greens. The amaranth seed is super high in lysine, which most greens aren't. So in dancing the seed, you just dance. So you're like, you're stamping, you're doing this, and you're doing the same thing as we're doing there. So let's dance some seed. Let's have everybody else rub this seed into the buckets, and then we're going to do some screening and winnowing. So, yeah, everybody just, and this seed I found like rubbing like this, just really, yeah. The amaranth seed's real tiny. It's a real tiny little seed. So any way that you want to do it, just go for it, grab some seed. There are different kinds of amaranth on it.
The beautiful thing about Amaranth also how pretty it is to grow it. They're flower bread, and everybody thinks it's just a beautiful flower, but you can eat it all.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
which is what I love about it.
You have to cook it?
You should, the greens, yes, because they can be high in oxide.
But you just steam them kind of like spinach.
Yeah, but they're very nutritious greens. Seeds are high in protein.
Is this pretty closely related to transporting?
Yes, totally.
And have you ever grown the variety that transported? It's up on the Saddle Road, just beyond the Mauna Kea State Park. Bushes, huge bushes. Some of them are as big as a pretty road.
Well, Miami pies, so you might want to get way down.
I don't know. It has that typical goose foot shape. Yeah. Yeah. I assume he eats it. I've seen it at his shop with a sandal.
Yes, that works as well. It's the red missing.
I'm not that fond of the seeds. I'd much rather eat the
Well, you cook them,
Because it never
Yeah.
freezes.
I think it's from South America mostly, right?
I have no idea.
We're going to just stuff it through this strainer into the bowl. And a lot of the chaff is going to go through, but it's going to be the finer chaff. So the screening, you're getting finer and finer. I have this is what we use for our honey, and this is a finer screen and even finer. So you have to make sure that the seed's not going to go all the way through. So you want something underneath. So we're going to pour this seed. You don't have to pour it through the strainer. You can pour it in the bowl or then through the strainer into another bowl. So I'm going to just use this to tell you the whole process, and then you can do this with your seed.
Things we take for granted.
So now look already how much seed is falling through.
Oh, yeah.
See that? See what's going on?
Hundreds of acres of
And this is
amaranth.
just, this is my kitchen strainer. And I only grew like 10 plants. I got this seed originally, I put it on the thing from a man in Molokai who grows it. So we always like to continue our seed stories. Who did we get it from? This is his favorite. Somebody asked me if it can be used as a dye. The red flower, when it's like that fresh, those are more fresh flowers. It can be. So you'll do that, and then there'll still be some chaff in here. So what you can do is just with amaranth, it does this really neat thing. It's like liquid soil. It's kind of like what happens in the earthquake zones. The chaff has now come to the surface, and if you have a lot of big chaff, you can rake it off. But now I would go outside and just very carefully blow this. So if you want to go with your group and do that, it's very light seed, so don't be like, be gentle. Some people separate seed by winnowing in front of a big box fan, and they have different tubs, so some of the stuff will go into one and you'll put about 2 tubs, and they'll just pour it slowly on low speed. So there's all kinds of ways to do it.
Put it back.
If we do this seed ambassador group, one of the things that will really be fun is working with each other to harvest and clean seed and learn about seed.
Out to seed.
So
I'm going to share that information.
in order to take seed, you've got to turn in your...
Yes, so that you can grow seed to share.